Then next to him we have Mark Grayson. He's Chief Operating Officer of BCLP. He works in the delivery centre in Manchester and has been a key player in their apprenticeship programme, which I believe is award-winning and has been running for 5 years now. And he's got 2 decades of experience of leadership positions in law firms. Then next to him we have Lucy Reed. She's Senior Commissioning Editor at the Oxford University Press. She's got more than 2 decades worth of experience of legal publishing, and since 2005 has been working a lot on commissioning vocational law course materials and undergraduate law student materials. Then along from there we have Andrew Callahan. He was previously a partner at DLA, as it was then known, and he now heads up the Centre for Professional Legal Education at the University of Sheffield. And then next to him we have Sarah Hutchinson, who we just heard from. She's a solicitor who was a commercial lawyer. She then went on to work in senior roles at the College of Law. She's now Managing Director at Barberie, who specialise in training overseas, international lawyers for qualifying both in the bar exams in California and New York, as well as the QLTS here. She's also a member of the International Bar Association. And then finally, we have Rachel Hossack, who I think began life in a traditional law firm, but then moved over to the legal environment of the 4 big accountancy firms. And now she is one of the partners at the newly established UK Deloitte legal practice. So there we go. That's the run through. So I think it's probably fair to start with Andy and go along. So Andy, do you want to say just a couple of minutes around? Oh, right, okay. Did anyone hear any of that? So yes, so there we go. My voice is now even louder and clearer, which whether that is good or bad news for you, you can decide. But yes, so we'll start with Andy. If Andy starts going way over 2 minutes, I might raise my hand so we can get through everyone. But over to you, Andy.
Can you hear me without one? Yeah. So we decided that it was difficult, possibly undesirable, to try and create a law degree that prepared students to go straight onto the SQE1 exam. But we also thought that many law students would be interested in at least working towards the option of qualifying as a solicitor. So we've decided to look at creating a Head Start law degree, which means that we're going to do more of what we want to do, which is experiential clinical learning, to do as much pre-learning around skills and procedure as we can, and where we use multiple choice questions as part of our assessment strategy, we're aligning those, or we're trying to align those, and it was very good to see the sample questions come out yesterday, with the SQE style questions. It's early days, but we are assuming that students that are familiar with the assessment method will have an advantage over students who start cold in an SQE1 exam. Then we're going to come back into the professional qualification market. We've not had an LPC for more than 10 years. And embed SQE1 into a master's course. We're doing that because we think some of our students will want a loan. You can only get a loan if you embed the training in a master's. And we think that we're quite well placed to make sense of the stretch between preparation for SQE1 and the achievement of master's levels outcomes. And we want to do that through reflective practice. We're looking at possibly working with Barberie to incorporate some of their materials into the course. We want to offer the students clinical and experiential learning experiences. We'll reflect on that, and that will be the M-level element of the course. We hope that the students will get a very good head start on SQE2 because of that experience. We think it's a weakness of the SQE proposals as a whole that there appears to be no place where anyone has responsibility for mentoring and developing skills. So we would like to try and remedy that. Obviously, we also want our students to get as much qualifying work experience as they can that is consistent with the course. And one of the options that we're exploring is working with FLEX or Flex, the online paralegal Airbnb site or matching site, and we would like to induct our students into their system so that they can be found as potential paralegals, and we would like to work with our local legal community to sort of encourage them that if they are recruiting paralegals and they do it through Flex, they can be investing in their own local community. So that's what, in outline, what we're hoping to do.
Thank you very much, Andy, and on to you, Mark.
So I will use the microphone. I'm Mark Grayson from BCLP. We're an international law firm. We've got about 1,500 lawyers across the globe, and we set up our Manchester office 5 years ago with a mandate, a brief to look at doing things a bit differently, both from a process and a technology perspective, but also from a people perspective. So we started our apprenticeship scheme in 2015. We take on roughly 4 apprentices a year, and we take them and start them on the 2-year paralegal apprenticeship, and then almost without exception move them on to the solicitor apprenticeship. We're really interested in the SQE and how it can give us some flexibility around how we train our apprentices alongside how we train our trainee solicitors through the more traditional route. Because ultimately our end point on all of this is that we want our lawyers who qualify, be it through the apprenticeship route or the traditional trainee route, to have equal skills, equal capabilities, possibly in different areas of law, but there should be equality in that sense, and they should be viewed equally across our firm as well.
Thank you. Over to you, Lucy.
I'll use this one as it's already switched on. Oxford University Press is probably a name that's familiar to most people in this room, I would hope. We're a publisher who has published legal textbooks for all types of student for many years. We publish for undergraduate students all the way through to vocational courses such as the LPC and the BPTC as well. And we considered at a very early stage what we might want to do to support people wanting to take the SQE. We held a series of focus groups to try to kind of generate some ideas about how we could support those students best. And since then, it's really been a constant process of kind of keeping in touch with the market. We've been attending SQE events. We've been talking to lecturers on campus. We've been talking to law firms and heads of department as well about SQE plans that are being put in place at universities. We decided to publish a series of 6 SQE manuals. They will match the SQE1 specification. And integral to each manual is a bank of multiple choice questions of the type that we expect to see within SQE1. And the purpose of those manuals and question banks is to support institutions wanting to run SQE preparation courses or modules that are going to be embedded within undergraduate or LLM courses. The manuals themselves will be very practical in focus. There'll be a section on ethics in each title. There'll be a section on exam technique, specifically to do with multiple choice questions in each manual as well. And each book will contain examples, summary points to support learning. In terms of the question banks themselves, each question will come with feedback on the answer that is selected by the student. That enables them to kind of understand themselves where they're going wrong. They'll then be able to refer back to the manual at an appropriate point so they can reread, so they can really understand where their misunderstanding has come from. We hope to present the questions in a way that means students can choose which topic they want to practice questions on. They will be able to choose an exam setting, so they can do almost like a simulation of a test if they want to. All of that functionality will be available within the platform that OUP will host the questions on. There will also be an option for law schools to embed those questions within their own VLE, in which case the functionality is a bit more dependent on the VLEs itself, the functionality that the VLE offers. Also, they'll be able to, if they're on the OUP platform, be able to track their scores against others within their cohort anonymously, but it's a useful point of comparison for them to see how their own progress is compared to their own peers. So really the emphasis is on learning and on supporting institutions as the SQE teaching develops and as plans are made for that in the way that OUP has done for many years, supporting undergraduate and other law students.
Thank you, Lucy, and over to you, Andrew.
So I'm Andrew Callaghan from the University of Sheffield. We currently offer a legal practice course and a GDL. And probably the easiest thing is if I ask you to look at the back page of the sheet that you have, and I'll essentially talk you through what's there. First thing, we haven't yet decided what we're going to do, but it's possible that we pull out of professional legal education, but assuming we don't do that, then the most obvious alternatives which are open to us are set out there. So firstly, for those who have a law degree or a GDL, the possibility is a course of around about 14 to 16 weeks, which wouldn't carry any university award or a part-time version of that. The precise length of it depends on the decision as to whether or not writing and research are to be included within the SQE 1 exam. That probably makes a difference of a couple of weeks or so to the length of a possible course. Or one could offer a master's course which includes that core course and other elements which might be some parts of SQE 2, perhaps a dissertation or further academic study. And the advantage of doing that would be making it available for postgraduate funding, which of course is a significant issue as far as prospective students are concerned. For those with a non-law degree, the possibilities are doing a GDL as now. Of course, that's not a requirement in the future as far as qualifying is concerned, but many firms are saying to us that as far as non-law graduates are concerned, they will still want them to do a GDL. Or one could roll up a GDL with the core course and perhaps other elements to make that into a master's program and again make it eligible for postgraduate funding. As far as undergraduate provision is concerned, and this is in many respects I think the trickiest area, I don't feel it's possible to offer SQE teaching within a 3-year program, but it might be possible to offer an optional year to extend a 3-year program into a 4-year program. And one would then include a SQE 1 course and again potentially other elements, and that would make that eligible for undergraduate funding. So that's a possibility. The issues for students, as I mentioned at the bottom there, how long it's going to take. And clearly, as far as most people are concerned, they want to progress as quickly as possible. Issues relating to fees and funding for those who are having to fund themselves and not being funded by future employers. And the other issue is the standard it's being assessed to, which of course is that of a day solicitor. And to expect undergraduates to take a break from their undergraduate studies or immediately after their undergraduate studies and take assessments which are being assessed to a significantly higher standard than they're being assessed at undergraduate level is something which one has to think very carefully about before deciding whether to offer courses at that level. Certainly the last thing we want to do is to set students up to fail. I'm not saying it can't be done, I think it can, but it probably requires strong students and really high quality teaching.
Thank you. Next up, Sarah.
Is that on? Yes, great. Thank you. My name's Sarah Hutchinson. I'm from Barberie. Just a bit of background in case you haven't heard about Barberie. Barberie is originally was an American company. We've got about a 50-year history of preparing people to sit the American bar exams. And the reason that's relevant is because certainly SQE 1 is very similar to the multi-state bar exam, which is used in about 26 of the 50-odd US states. So it's very similar assessment between the two organisations. Barberie trains, this is a bit of a horrifying statistic for you, there are 35,000 people taking the US bar exams every year, and about 28,000 of them prepare with Barberie. So we have about 28,000 students every year. And therefore, of course, inevitably, we've got quite sophisticated technology, quite sophisticated platforms, but most importantly, actually, a lot of data, because data, as much as Kaplan are going to rely very heavily upon data in order to assure the efficacy of the assessment, Equally, it's equally important that data is used in terms of preparation for those assessments, because you don't know if your individual learning objectives are effective unless you have data to prove it, and that's what Barberie's invested very heavily in. In 2017, we launched a QLTS preparation programme. The reason for doing that, you would never ever get involved in QLTS in any format if you wanted to make money. The numbers are just not big enough. But we went into the QLTS market purely to prepare for the SQE. I can see Eileen smiling wryly there. I'm sure exactly the same is true of Kaplan as well. QLTS is an extremely intensive assessment. It's got a very similar assessment methodology between SQE and QLTS. And we went into the QLTS prep so that we could learn some lessons in terms of creating faculty, in terms of creating UK law specialism, and most importantly, assessment methodology. So we've been doing that since 2017. We've got about 200 or 300 students a year going through the QLTS. Our objective in terms of entering the SQE market is to offer a different approach to assessment preparation. We are not going to try and wrap up SQE into a degree. What we would seek to do is to collaborate with universities. So Andy's very kindly name-checked Barberie. That was very generous of you. Thank you, Andy. But basically, we are working with a number of universities, including our hosts, Manchester University, including a number of former LPC universities as well, like South Bank, so that we can offer assessment preparation that can then be adopted by the university and integrated into their programmes. So we don't seek to compete with the universities, we seek to integrate and to support the universities in terms of collaborating with them. In terms of what are the objectives from the students' perspective, our objective is to come up with something that is very flexible. My view on this and experience from both the US and the QLTS is that one size will not fit all. So depending upon the employer, whether you are an apprentice employer or a trainee solicitor employer, depending on the university, depending on your type of cohort of students, what their objectives are, what the career objectives are, and depending on the students themselves, are they a paralegal, are they a fast-track trainee solicitor who's on a fast-track into the city, you're going to need different course lengths. And the courses themselves are going to have to be integrated over different timescales. And as Andrew quite rightly says, Andrew, you mentioned that eventually the assessment's going to be at a much higher level than we've experienced on the LPC. And again, you therefore want to build in the ability for SQE2 preparation to integrate into the training contract or into the work, the qualifying work experience, so that it can be taken over a longer time. I also think that then, if it's a longer course or an integrated program, that then addresses some of the affordability issues, because then it creates programs that can be studied whilst also earning. So you earn while you learn. So I think that's a very important feature, flexibility and adaptability. We're very interested in talking to people. My colleague Tracy is in the audience as well, and we would be delighted to talk to any university about your plans and about how we can support you. Thank you, Mem.
Thank you, and last, Rachel.
Hopefully, last but not least, I'm going to come at it from an employer perspective. Obviously, so I'm a partner at Deloitte, and we were one of the first people to announce that we're going to be embracing the SQE. And I guess just coming at that, why have we decided to do that? Well, Deloitte trains all its accountants and its tax providers as you just said, earn as you learn. So that is the way that we're used to training people. So we're just embracing the SQE in exactly the same way. We will be taking people on a 32-month journey. So our first intake, hopefully, on the SQE will be September next year. There'll probably be about 7. The interviews are in January, so we're still to finalise them. They will do the first 4 months intensive training out of the office. They'll then come back into the office and do the remainder of their 32 months with us, having a day release with the University of Law. So we're working with them at the moment to design the programme. It's been interesting hearing what people are saying about sort of the multiple choice. Can't think what the best answer or something is, the technical term is, isn't it? So we're working with the University of Law at the moment around those questions, and hopefully going to be using AI so that the students will be sent questions on a daily basis if they want to do on their smartphones or whatever, and it will learn from the answers that they give to those questions and tailor the next set of questions to those that they're struggling with. So the areas or the types of questions, and we're designing all that at the moment. I mean, the most exciting thing for us about the SQE is just that ability to bring people through, both on the training contracts, I said that 32 months, but also 6-year apprentices that will hopefully again be starting in September, doing, I think it's 4 years before they then transition, or 3 years before they then transition on to the 32-month SQE that we're rolling out. So yeah, that's pretty much us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the panellists for keeping pretty much the time there. So as we say, we want to get questions on this and get a discussion going. So first off, I'd like to make an appeal to anyone in the audience, whether you've got any questions. If you don't, then some of the panellists may have questions for each other, but if we're really struggling, then I've got a few questions for you as well. So any initial questions or even thoughts? Yes, we've got someone down here on the second row. You're being flanked on either side by microphones coming towards you, pincer movement.
Thank you.
Switched on?
Yes.
Phil Drake, University of Manchester. I'm the Director of the Justice Hub here. My question's to Andy. Hi, Andy. What I wanted is just some more details, really, about how you're planning to embed the SQE1 into a master's, and you mentioned that you're going to integrate reflective practice into this, and I was just wondering how you were going to go about doing that.
It's quite a daunting challenge to stretch from SQE1 up to master's levels. As a sketch, being honest, as a sketch, what I'm imagining is the students will have an ability to work with online resources as they concentrate, if you like, some of their time on preparing for SQE1. And that would be a minor assessment for each module, which would reflect each core subject. And then, so they would work on SQE1 prep for a minor assessment. They would also engage in clinic and simulation and placement and work experience during the week. We would try and create, we can't guarantee, but we would try and create through our clinic, through our relationships with the local legal community and through Flex, as much opportunity for the students to get varying kinds of work experience during the week. And we think we would probably only teach 2 sessions a week, 1 day a week, rather than 3. So there's an element of blended learning here. And then we would have sessions where, in various ways, we would reflect on that practice. Some of it would be doctrinal, some of it would be theoretical, some of it would be skills. And we would then have major assessments under each of the 6 core headings that were easily sort of recognizable as M-level assessments. So we're going to try and bring it together. It's a bit of a squaring of the circle, but that's a course that we're quite excited about, and we think it meets the M-level outcomes without being, if you like, a too great a tension between the students' desire to get through to SQE1 and pass and the need to embrace much more than SQE1 in a master's course.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Do you want to come back on that? Or Barry?
No, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, we've got Barry next.
Hi, I'm Barry Matthews, SRA board member. Just a question to the panel. We've had a lot about SQE1 preparation, and I'd really be interested to understand where you're at with SQE2 preparation.
Anyone want to kick off on that, Sarah?
Is it on? Yes, okay. Yeah, the main preparation for SQE2 has been through the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Scheme, because the second stage of the QLTS has got parallels to the proposals around SQE2. The experience has been that you have to move away from a classroom environment, and I think that's what is a fundamental shift in mindset. You cannot prepare for a skills assessment in a group of 16 to 20 people. You have to prepare for a skills assessment on an individual basis. And so we've shifted our mindset away from the classroom and more towards individual tuition. We've been working very closely with the College of Legal Practice, and the newly appointed Chief Exec, Giles Proctor, is in the room. And what we've done there is with the College of Legal Practice, and we've moved together to create, effectively, it's a one-on-one mentoring programme, where a student practices, self-reflects, practices, gets feedback, practices in a simulated assessment, and then and only then tackles the final assessment.
Anyone else on the panel want to add on that, Andrew?
Yes, I think it's largely a question of timing. What is the best timing? The original scheme, I think, that the SRA had in mind was that people would take SQE2 towards the end of qualifying work experience. That was never a requirement. The idea being that the qualifying work experience itself prepares one for those skills exams, and of course that makes complete sense. In practice, however, it's clear that some firms would rather that their trainees, if I can call them that, take some of those assessments at a rather earlier stage, and there's the possibility that those individuals who don't have employment arranged, in order to make themselves more attractive to firms, might also want as individuals to take SQE2 at an earlier stage than was originally envisaged. So from our point of view as a provider, it's quite difficult to judge the point at which we should be offering SQE2 training to individuals. We can incorporate elements of skills within other programs. It's not too difficult to do that. But I agree with Sarah. It's hard to expect someone to pass those assessments to the level which is required without them having spent some sort of time in the workplace and been exposed, for example, to clients.
Yeah.
And then
Rachel,
I guess just following on exactly from that, from both people. So from our perspective, we will be doing the first 18 months, the SQE assessment, and then moving them into SQE2 and doing exactly what you were saying there, Sarah. They will have a mentor or a coach from the University of Law who sits down with them on their Fridays, their one-day release, reflects on what they've been doing, I think does a few assessments with them and gives them some things for the next week. And then during the 12 months of that SQE2 prep, they will also be sitting down with their equivalent of their supervisor every sort of 3 months, just to reflect on what they're doing in the workplace as well, to bring in all of that learning so they're ready for SQE2 at the end of their 32 months, because we're doing SQE1, 18 months in, and SQE2 assessment at the end.
Thank you. I think there was... Sorry, yeah. Oh, sorry, Lucy. Yeah.
Just to add that OUP are also looking at developing something to support people taking SQE2. Our plans are at an earlier stage than they are for SQE1, but we're looking at doing something far more interactive and online based to reflect the kind of more practical nature of SQE2.
Okay, that's great. We've got a question at the back, I think.
It's a follow-up question, actually, back to Andy, and then another one to the rest of the panel, about the Masters, Andy. Just wondered if Flex had guaranteed places for that, because that would be quite interesting if they had. And the other question was, as undergraduate students moving into the Masters, would you be counting any time that they spend in a clinic as an undergraduate moving forward in terms of the hours that they do as undergraduates on the Masters programme? So that's to everyone else really who might be involved in developing those kind of things as well at the Masters level.
So I think it's Randy first, yeah.
Some years ago we created a compulsory core module in the second year of the degree. Some years ago, we created a core compulsory module in the second year of the law degree called Working in the Law. And the idea was to create a space within the degree where students could get normally extracurricular experience, because we realized that many of our students were just working and had family commitments and so on and didn't have space to do that career development. And what unlocked the door for us starting was a decision not to guarantee a place for everyone, because we couldn't. So we had a default assessment that you could take to reflect on skills and careers if you didn't have a placement, or if you didn't, or if the placement didn't work. And that allowed us to build up a network. So I don't think that we are guaranteeing work experience except in the clinic. And I think we need to supplement that with simulations. I hosted a conference at the beginning of the year, and I'm trying to push the idea that some of us might collaborate around sharing simulations so that we can incorporate that into our teaching. And Emily Albon at City has just released an online town called Coltsfoot Vale, which you can go into and discover land law problems. So we're thinking of a mixture of clinic and simulation as the guaranteed core. Flex can't guarantee work. They're simply a platform offering it. What we would do is agree with them that they would induct all of our students into their platform and that we would work together to promote that to the local legal community. So we're going to increase the opportunities. So we're saying we know you're likely to be working, most of you, during the course. Let's all work together to try and ensure as much of that is legal work experience, but that's extra. And what was there a second part to that? No, the time, if you like, will be the self-directed learning and the class-based learning and a minimum content of experiential learning. So the work you did in the clinic historically won't give you any exemptions, not in the way that we're imagining the course at the moment. What we're hoping, though, and that's what this afternoon is about, is that as all the work that people have done can be captured in a simple and flexible way to be offset against the 2 years work experience. And one of the reasons why we've sort of become friends with Flex is that they are trying to develop a tool in which you could capture your work experience with them, and I think they are likely to be considered an employer by the SRA. So that for me is quite a revolutionary idea, that you could get your work experience through someone like Flex. But certainly that's what we want to look at. And just to plug, we'd like clinic and law tech work to count towards work experience.
Thank you. And I think I'm right in saying that qualified work experience still has to be signed off by a solicitor. But does anyone else want to talk through either law clinics or approach to qualifying work experience? Is there a real opportunity for universities who either have a law clinic or to get more into that space?
I think there's just one thing I would add to that, which is that many larger firms are saying that, notwithstanding that time spent in law clinics and so on will count towards qualifying work experience, and give an individual a badge that says solicitor partway through their 2 years with a firm, in fact, they will still require everybody to go through what they regard as their 2-year program. So that may be time which in some cases, if you like, technically counts, but doesn't count in practice.
Okay, interesting point.
Just from an employer perspective, is that working? No, I'll try this one. Just from an employer perspective, the concept of qualifying work experience is one that I think law firms are still grappling with. Flex is an interesting point in some senses, in that essentially the idea that a student or somebody post-qualification, because they Flex use people who've already qualified and done their LPC, for example, can go and get some work experience, but that work experience can often be quite short and sharp, and it doesn't always build up the sort of skills that employers are looking for a newly qualified solicitor. I think employers also are grappling with the concept of how you vouch for and check the quality of the work experience that's being done if you're then recruiting somebody. So I think qualifying work experience is a really interesting and ongoing debate within the profession as to how we get a sense of the quality of that experience.
And I think Andy wanted to make the point, and obviously the check on qualifying work experience is the SQE 2, whereas at the moment 2,000 different law firms are signing off whether someone has met the required competence. That now shifts to SQE 2 as the check of whether someone has met the required competence. Andy, you wanted to add something to that?
Well, just to say that I think that there are sort of two sort of different directions of travel. One is traditional law firms who are anticipating quite a lot of continuity in how they recruit and train staff. And then there are the more flexible ways of qualifying and practicing that are opening up in the future. I thought one of the most interesting developments in the handbook consultation was the shift away from the notion that you had to work for 3 years post-qualification for another lawyer who had 3 years plus qualification. And I'm not a very good lawyer, really, but I think that the outcome is a rule that says you can't set up in practice on your own on day one. You have to work with a lawyer who has 3 years post-qualification experience, but not 4. So you can drag in someone who's got that experience and set up your own business. So some people may never be passing through a traditional firm who are requiring 2 years with them. They may be ticking off their work experience, passing their exams, and going almost immediately to setting up their own business. And it may not look like a traditional business model. It may not have an office and staff. It may be online. So there's quite a lot happening sort of alongside and running through what we're through SQE 1 and 2.
I mean, interestingly, I was speaking to someone who's gone through the flex route, and he was struggling to qualify as a solicitor even though he'd done his LPC because he had caring responsibilities, and that meant it was very difficult for him to get a training contract at a city firm, which is where he wanted to go. And actually, he was extremely positive about the SQE because suddenly he could actually build his own qualifying work experience and get that solicitor title when he thought he was good enough to do that, but in a different way. Has anyone got any further points on that panel or additional questions? We've got a gentleman here.
Hello, Scott Slurry from University of York. It's a question, I think, for Andy and Andrew predominantly. I'll congratulate Andy, first of all, for his careful observation of SRA intellectual property rights by mentioning they'll be using SQE style MCQs, like Greek style yogurt, etc. The embedding into degree programs, and I'm sure it's something a lot of colleagues will be looking at potentially undergraduate level or potentially LLM level, raises questions of level, i.e. is SQE 1 going to be taught and or assessed and form part of award-bearing programs, and if so, what have been your views as to what level that should be? I mean, the answer may be it doesn't matter, and you choose your own exit level, and if they manage to pass SQE, that's all right. We're just thinking across institutions, we could have a situation where students are getting credit for doing SQE stuff at any of levels 4, 5, 6, and 7. What are your thoughts on that?
Andrew?
I think one can prepare students for the centrally set assessments to the level required by those, day one solicitor, and assess students internally to a different level. And I think that's how it would have to be addressed.
Sarah just wanted to say something, and then we'll come to Andy.
Just to add experience from the US. In the US, a number of universities have started to integrate parts of bar preparation into the JD, the US Law School. They are, however, seeing this as beyond credit, so it's extra to credit. So it's not part of the JD, it's not an accredited part of the JD programme. It's almost always integrated by universities who have got mixed range student bodies, particularly students who have been struggling to then get through the bar. So this is because, you know, in the States, the US law schools are ranked according to bar passage, in other words, according to their success rate in the bar exams. So the US law schools have become very concerned about their success rate in the bar. So those universities that traditionally had struggled with pass rates have now integrated assessment materials in particular, that have been part of from the student's perspective, it was part of the course, but actually it wasn't accredited, it wasn't credit bearing, the materials or the assessment. And I think what they've seen, therefore, is a significant, or at least it's not a significant, statistically it adds about 1 or 2% to their bar passage. But all that really does is it gives their students a kind of level playing field so that when they do go into their formal bar preparation, they can at least compete on a level playing field, and that's what they've been doing in the States.
Andy?
Well, I agree with Andrew. I note that SQE hasn't been mapped onto the sort of qualifications framework, so it's a bit of an open question. But I think that that's the reason why we've come up with the notion of a head start in terms of the degree. And for the law schools like us who embrace clinical and experiential learning, there are lots of opportunities to do, if you like, pre-learning, familiarity with procedure and skills that are part of the intrinsic teaching and learning philosophy of the degree itself. We think it's a good way of learning law, and nonetheless has this benefit of being a head start on the SQE.
Thank you. We've got further questions from the audience. We've got a gentleman in blue shirt there.
Thank you. Andrew Gilbert from Anglia Ruskin. It's kind of a question to Andy and Andrew, but whoever wants to answer. We've been working on this, like all of us, for many years, and we've been all around the houses with the various permutations. And I suppose my question or observation is, for institutions which cannot trade on their reputations alone, and perhaps none of us can, because it's also about outcomes, even for the highest rank institutions. But for those of us who don't have that luxury, our concern is that not offering a 3-year SQE oneready LLB, even though that looks unpleasant in many ways, is an existential matter. And we're concerned, so it's kind of, I imagine Andy's given a lot of thought to this, but that if we don't do it, we won't, who will come? It's kind of a question about what is the point of a 3-year non-SQE oneready law degree from an institution which does not have reputational advantage? And that's the real concern that we've been wrestling with, and not an easy one we can see a way around, even though it's very risky in terms of pedagogy and student progression and all those other things. So there we go.
Good
Got it off my
question.
chest.
Andrew, do you want?
Yes, it is very risky, isn't it? And certainly my university wouldn't do it. And it's a shame that an individual university is partly driven by what it thinks other people might be doing. I think you just have to decide what's right for you and your institution and follow that. But personally, I think it's very difficult to offer a 3-year program which properly prepares people for SQE 1 exams. In any event, you're bound to squeeze the academic content of that program. You will have students who are coming onto a law degree who have no intention of ever qualifying, so you would have to, from the very beginning, offer different pathways through, and you start to create something which is looking fairly complicated.
Andy?
I agree with that, really. But I also told my staff, my colleagues, that I thought that SQE was an existential threat, as you say. I think when we've been around the houses, we've thought about it, we've talked to friends and colleagues across the sector, I think we're gambling that it's so hard to do a 3-year degree that does what a degree should do and prepares you to leave the university in June and July and go and do SQE 1 as soon as it's offered in September, October or November, that not many people are going to do it, and not many people are going to do it well. So we've settled in this position not of an SQE degree, but of an SQE Head Start. We think you have to address it, but you don't necessarily have to try and do everything within the 3 years. So that's the gamble that we're taking.
If I could just come back, I mean, that's all very interesting, but part of the SRA's objective is disruption of the market, or hoping that the market will be disrupted. And part of that is of opening access to the profession is about keeping costs down. And so if students are still having to take 4 years of compulsory, expensive education to do so, that's not meeting that objective. And my concern is the university just down the road will do that. And if we don't, then they'll win and we'll lose. And that's a horrible position to find ourselves in. And we don't have to do what the SRA says, but that is one of the agendas. And others will find a way, because that's the nature of the market. And that's interesting, the comment of Andrew from Sheffield, but that's not the reality for us. We are in a market, and we'd like to ignore what everyone else is doing, but we can't, because students, it's a buyer's market, as we know, more than ever.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Are educational institutions and training providers going to need to target their market more? I.e., do you need to make a call? Are we targeting people who want to be solicitors, or are we targeting people who are more interested in getting a degree in the study of law?
School leavers don't know. That's the point. You know, they don't know. You know, less than half qualify as lawyers, but nearly all of them think that they might want to, till they learn how horrible it is.
And on that note, your conference is finished.
No, but so I think it's very difficult to do SQE 1 in a 3-year degree. So those who want to try and do it, let them. I think they might fail, and students will learn the lesson and they will come. In terms of, you know, disruption, the SRA have rowed back from claims of SQE being cheaper and better for diversity, and they're standing their ground now on consistent high standards of qualification at day one.
I see Julie's got her hand up.
Okay, well that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure she's entitled, it's her party, she's entitled to a right to reply. I think where the disruption will come is whether or not we are pushing standards up or lowering them, making it easier to qualify or less. And I sort of swing backwards and forwards on this. I think that what we're going to end up with is going to be better than current worst practice, but not necessarily as good or as rigorous as current best practice. I certainly think we're going to see, between what's happening with technology and what's happening with SQE, I think we're going to see a kind of generation of new entrants into the legal services market who will do things differently.
Other views from the panel on that, Sarah?
In terms of integration into a 3-year programme, if it's that there is some comfort for you that I can offer, again, experience from the States, and some red flag warnings. The comfort is that, notwithstanding the fact that the expectation is that people sit the bar exam immediately on graduation, in fact it hasn't significantly changed the syllabus or the content of most law degrees in the States, and something like 97% of all law graduates still go on and do a separate bar preparation programme, albeit that bar preparation programme is very intensive and very short. And I think that's where the disruptive element comes in. You don't have to do a 4th year to do SQE 1. And I think that's the disruption. That also, to support Julie, and I'll hand over to Julie because she's waving like mad, but that's also where the affordability comes in, because if you don't have to do a 4th year to do SQE 1, that then makes it more affordable.
Julie, have you got something to say?
I hope I've got the mic. Is that microphone on? So I just wanted to pick up on Andy's point. Absolutely. That consistency and the standard and the quality of the assessment is absolutely critical, no question. But the diversity, the widening access, the bearing down on cost is also really important to us. I have to say that I have found this debate absolutely fascinating. It's been so interesting to hear some of the innovative practice from the panel, and you know, my, you know, congratulations to everybody for the quality of the thought and the care that's gone into the formulation of the plans. But you know, we're hearing about AI being used as part of this. We're hearing about online mentoring. We're hearing about lots of new practice, which really is about, you know, developing, bringing education into the 21st century. But both of those are really important aspects, and I think it's very important for everybody to recognise that they are core aspects of our proposals. It's not about telling people what to do. You will all have your own positions about what works best for your target students and for your organisation, and those are questions for you to make alone to work out what works best for you. But those twin objectives absolutely call for us.
Right, we've got time for a couple more questions and we might be able to get into a break. We've got one from Nick here, just towards the front.
Thanks, Ben. Nick Eastwell, City Advisor to the SRA. A question really for Andrew and Andy, and picking up, I think it was Andrew from Andy Ruskin's point. My daughter did the GDL a couple of years ago, and my son's now doing the GDL, and I had a debate with them about SQE1 and what that would mean, and they both said, well, if I can do a GDL in 1 year, why can't universities over a course of 3 years be able to do enough to get me through the exemption subjects and raise me to SQE1 level? And my son made the point that if universities don't do that, when students are paying £27,000 now for 3 years of a law degree plus their living expenses, he thinks there's going to be a lot of discussion around that topic. And so I'd be interested to hear why both Andy and Andrew are sceptical about the ability of universities to provide that 3-year course.
Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, certainly as far as my university is concerned, and probably Russell Group universities generally, they will still want to keep a 3-year purely academic degree programme available, and will simply not be prepared to make space for SQE1 teaching, unless at some stage the market drives them into doing that. Most Russell Group universities will probably not engage at all with SQE1 in the hope that they simply don't have to do so. So in many ways, actually, my university is an exception, as is Cardiff, simply because we already offer the legal practice course, and so we have the ability and the expertise to actually do that. For anybody who's not currently offering the legal practice course, including SQE training in any program, whether in an undergraduate degree or anywhere else, requires quite a significant investment. So it's a big, big decision for those institutions to be taking.
Andy?
I think in addition to, if you like, the practical problems, if you don't already have practitioners as part of your teaching body, it's a very big demand to recruit people who can teach the procedural elements and the skills elements of SQE. But when we looked at it, you've got this huge centrally set exam, and it seems to me that if that's where you're heading, then the last year of your degree is preoccupied by that. Whereas at the moment you might do contract in the first year and crime in the second year and land in the third year. Structurally you have to put everything into the final year. Then what the SQE has done is it's taken the procedural half of the LPC and shoved it into a degree. So that knocks out another chunk. So it begins to look like you lose all options, you lose theory, and you lose independent project work. And for us, the final dissertation is a capstone assessment. So it just seems very difficult to do the two things, to meet the requirements of the benchmark for law, and to honestly and fully and properly prepare the students to go and do SQE1 within 3 months. So although it's a kind of obvious, attractive idea, we just felt that it's very difficult to do that. And for example, in SQE1, really, you're drilling people to know binary answers to legal questions, whereas the law degree under the benchmark is encouraging students to handle ambiguity. And so there are these contradictions, and we just felt that we couldn't honestly do it well, and we're sufficiently confident to feel that we'll leave it to others to try.
And Nick, you just wanted to come back.
I guess I understand why it's going to be difficult, but another thing I've been doing in the last 10 years, I was deputy chair for governors at the University of Greenwich for 9 years, and I was at the Governors' Chairs Conference, it must have been 18 months ago, and the big topic that chairs of governors across the whole country were talking about was the increase in fees is putting huge pressure on students wanting to be vocationally trained. A lot of kids are now saying, I can't afford to spend that kind of money if I'm not ready when I leave to go straight into employment. So my own view, having been a governor for 9 years, is that a lot of universities are going to have to get used to the idea that come and the SQE1 course, they're going to have to find a way of being able to offer a 3-year course, because that's what people will demand.
I'd just like to bring in Sarah here, actually, just to talk about the Barberie's experience of how much preparation you have to do, you know, after a traditional law degree to get ready.
Yeah, I do think we're talking about all or nothing, and I think there's a path in between, and I think that's the path that we would be interested in working with the university sector in, which is that you can retain the integrity and the academic and intellectual rigour of an academic law degree and give people a head start around SQE, both in terms of content and also assessment methodology, that then prepares people for a very intensive SQE1 prep course. And I think the thing to remember is that you cannot go into this type of assessment, and the same is true as also for SQE2, SQE1 and 2. You have to be exam ready on the day. So you have to be, it's a bit like running a marathon. You wouldn't prepare for a marathon over 3, well, you might do, but over 3 years. You're going to have to ramp up your preparation in the last 6 to 8 weeks. And preparing for an assessment of this nature is exactly the same. You have to ramp up and be very focused on that assessment prep immediately before the assessment. You can do it on a very intensive basis. We're proposing to create an SQE1 prep course that is 10 weeks long. That may have to extend if there are skills. Andrew's already touched upon that, and he's right. If the skills component comes back into SQE1, then that will be slightly extended. But SQE1 prep for 10 weeks is achievable. We're convinced about that. And I think that's where the middle ground comes. You can retain your integrity of your degree, you can get people ready as they're going through that degree, but then you really intensively prepare them on a short, sharp preparation programme. Again, the objective, again, I'm trying to keep the cost affordable and capable of being spread across people's work experience. Ideally, we'd like the total cost of qualifying to come in at under 10,000, and of course the SRA has indicated its fees will be between 3 and 4.5, something like that. So again, that rather limits what we can charge by way of preparation to about 6,000 for SQE1 and 2. Now, where the balance of that will lie between 1 and 2 is not yet clear. It depends again on what the format of SQE1 and 2 itself will be like, but that's our objective. Is so you know, if as a rough rule of thumb, about 3,000 for SQE1 prep.
Andrew,
just going back to Nick's question on squeezing things into a 3-year programme. I think it is partly a question of making space in such a programme. It's partly a question of the standards as well. Scott's question, I think, referred to that. Within their degrees, they're being prepared for assessments to one level, to degree standard. For SQE1, they're being prepared for something which should be to a significantly higher standard, and it's difficult to do that. And institutions have to bear in mind the stats, the league tables, which the SRO will be producing. And it's not in any institutions to their advantage to prepare people for external exams who then don't do well, because that will come back and bite them.
I wanted to just on the cost point, because we just got Mark, obviously the most affordable way to qualify potentially for the SQE is through an apprenticeship programme. You could actually have 0 cost. I suppose, but one challenge at the moment with the apprenticeship route is sometimes some people see it as a sort of second class or second tier way of qualifying. Do you think there's potential or opportunities around it bolstering trust in that route and having more people consider the apprenticeship route to qualify?
Well, I mean, until the apprenticeship came along, people didn't really have the option to leave school at 18 and go and qualify as an as a lawyer. They still had to go through the traditional route. So it's still a really early concept for a lot of people, and that's why I think it's important that firms like ourselves, who've got a good reputation, known for delivering good quality legal services, put their weight behind it, which is what we've been doing, and we've spent quite a bit of time adapting how we bring our apprentices through, and I know from speaking at other conferences that we have a different approach to other law firms, and there's no one set way yet to perfectly train and bring an apprentice through the system. What I will say is that I'm pretty confident from what I've seen so far that our apprentices who are now at their 4th and 5th year of being with us are already at the sort of level of our trainees, and yet they're not yet educationally at the point at which they're matching each other, if that makes sense. So in terms of the practice of law, the practicalities of being a lawyer, I am more than confident that an apprentice will be at least as good and stand at least as well against a solicitor who's come through the traditional route. And one of the points I want to make just from listening to all of this is that as employers, one of the things that we really are looking for from our lawyers is the ability to solve clients' problems, and that's what we see with our apprentices, because they've been exposed from such an early age to work experience. They've from the age of 18, they've spent 4 days a week working. They're already thinking about what clients want from us, whereas with a trainee, we still find that there's very much a traditional mindset approach to how they go about delivering law, if you like, to our clients, rather than solving the problems that those clients have.
Rachel, I'm going to bring you in, and then as Claire is our host today, I'll go over to you, and then we might have time for one more question. We've got 5 minutes, so if everyone keeps it fairly short.
So I'll just be quite brief, but I just wanted to echo that on the apprentices. Obviously not from a legal perspective, because we haven't had our first legal apprentices yet, but we're used to having them within the accountancy and the tax profession, and they are probably the best juniors that we have. Once they get to the end of that 6 years, they're probably better than the trainees, because they've had that practical experience for the whole 6 years of their career.
Yep. So with a gentleman, we go to Claire, and then there's a gentleman in the middle, I think.
Yeah, so Claire McGauley, University of Manchester. I think I would just go back to the question, I think, that, I'm sorry I forgot your name, the gentleman asked in the first place, because I don't think we've actually answered that question about why can't, his 2 children are doing the GDL, so why can't universities, what's the problem with them integrating the GDL? There's lots of different reasons for this, and I don't think we've unpacked that, to do with the demographic of your students, your staff, and so on. University law schools and law departments are very different, and some will choose to do one thing and some will choose to do another. And we made the decision in Manchester not to integrate the SQE because as Sheffield, I spent the last 6 years of my life designing two new curriculums with the SQE in mind. Not to integrate the SQE, and not because I think it will fail, because we wanted to do things in very different ways. And at Manchester, we don't have the staff either, so we don't do an LPC, we don't do a GDL, so you would have to have a whole new suite of staff to do that. And students come to us, only around 50% of our students go on to be solicitors or barristers, and the other 50% are there to read law and to do that and to have that academic experience. So that's why you can't just pick up the GDL and then the LPC. So it's not just the GDL, by the way. The GDL is there for non-law graduates. It's the LPC as well, and just throw that into your undergraduate course. So there are lots of different reasons.
That's really useful. I think we've got this gentleman. This is the last question, because I don't want to keep you back from a top up on the coffee.
Yeah, Darren Weir from the Kent University Law School. Reflecting on what my colleague from Anglia said, and also what Claire has just said, and what you said, Benedict, about law schools having to look for what their market of student is. My question really is to the SRA, is do you care about the reputation of legal training worldwide? Because many universities like us are concerned with the fact that this doesn't fit in with the education of those who come to this country from the Commonwealth because of the qualifying law degree, which is being abolished. And we're being told by those Commonwealth countries that those people can no longer come here unless the degrees are regulated in one way or another. What are we going to do about that market, which is very affluent in terms of the economy, but also the diversity as well, as some of those students do also stay on and provide the wealth of diversity and experience that they bring from their countries?
Well, you can have an amateur answer from me or an expert answer from Julie. So we'll go to Julie.
Very briefly say that we have written to all jurisdictions of which we're aware around the world. Of course, the law degrees do continue to be regulated qualifications. They are regulated qualifications. They don't cease to be regulated qualifications because they are not a QLD anymore. And the purpose of the SQE, sometimes I have very odd conversations with other jurisdictions where I say, hey, we're doing a really new thing in the UK, in England and Wales. We are having a new centralised assessment, a bar exam, if you like, for solicitors. And they look at me in absolute mystification, because that's what they all have. And actually, you know, if we want to uphold the standing of the profession internationally, we do that through having a rigorous and robust assessment of solicitors before they enter the profession.
Thank you, Julie. Sarah, is there anything you wanted to add on that one from your experience?
Yeah, just within the International Bar Association, I chair the Academic and Professional Development Committee, and to echo that, there are two aspects to the training in England and Wales which have been both a puzzle to the international market, but also the envy of the international market. So one aspect is the fact that it was a puzzle to the international market that we didn't have a national bar exam. That really is very unusual, that there wasn't one single test. But what was the envy, and I really applaud the SRA for retaining the qualifying work experience, because of course in most jurisdictions you do a national bar exam and then you're immediately admitted. And actually the presence of the qualifying work experience, which has been retained, albeit in a more flexible and perhaps modern format, and a flexible, I think flexibility is the key for the legal services market, that is highly esteemed by the international market, and it's one of the badges of England and Wales that is most respected. And I think that, you know, again, I think we still hold on to that.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I think that is time. Could I just ask you to thank the panel for their answers? Lots of great food for thought there. We've got about 15 minutes where you can go and grab coffee, and then we're back in here.